Talk about the history of affirmative action, or actually the repeal of affirmative action in the United States. Because in the video where this comment is from, I talk about the history of how Jewish applicants in the 1920s and 1930s were denied admission to some of the top colleges and universities, even though they had better test scores. And that is because the white admissions counselors at these top colleges and universities, namely the Ivy League schools, decided to incorporate things like extracurricular activities, personal essays, and letters of recommendation so that those students could be judged on metrics that did not include grades. Of course, we live in a very different system from the 1920s and 1930s because we have a system where we now incorporate those metrics into how we judge students. So to compare apples and oranges is a little bit silly, if I'm being honest. But why don't we strike up a conversation about affirmative action and how it affects Asian students, other minorities, as well as white applicants and women. In 2023, the Students for Fair Admission, a mostly group of Asian students, sued Harvard University as well as the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill on the basis that affirmative action violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, and therefore affirmative action was unconstitutional. Affirmative action is a set of policies and procedures that takes into consideration an applicant's background. This is mostly thought of based on race because African American, Hispanic, and Indigenous communities tend to come from poorer and more disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds than white applicants. And so, in the Supreme Court case, in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court decided to rule that affirmative action was unconstitutional. And what happened to the number of Asian applicants? But first, let's start with what happened to other applicants of color, namely Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous applicants. You look at what happened to Black students when affirmative action was repealed. Black students were denied admission by some of the top colleges and universities in an aggregate of around 1%. This is also true for Hispanic applicants. This is also true for Indigenous applicants. Not surprising given the arguments of the plaintiff. Now, you would think that when you repeal affirmative action, based on the arguments of the plaintiffs of the case, the number of Asian acceptances at some of the top colleges and universities would increase. The results were mixed. At some colleges and universities, the admissions did go up, at Columbia and Brown, for example. However, the admission of Asian applicants went down at Yale and Princeton. The results were mixed. In fact, the only increase of acceptances among demographics, among people,